Okay, I want to talk about this book here. As you can see, it's called Martin John by Anakana Schofield, and it's published by And Other Stories. Um, it's her second novel. I believe she's an Irish writer living in Canada. Um, it's extraordinary first, but I want to talk about something else before that. Um, a lot of novels, a lot of kind of bland, somewhat unadventurous novels seem to me to deal with the lives of others, not the other, but others, just other people. And I think that's a kind of safe bet. I mean, there are films called The Life of Others and The Lives of Others, and there's a been, I think one of the Booker nominees of last year shortlisted was that. I think there's been a TV show in the US called that. But that seems to me it's a slightly kind of superficial look. We understand the lives of others in these things by looking at their lives. It's a kind of version of a kind of literary version of behaviorism. We know something about people simply by looking at their behavior. Um, where I think novels are really important is that they can deliver something which, in many ways, is an impossibility, which is knowing the mind of others. Um, whether this is particularly interesting because clearly the protagonist is in no way the a version of the writer. Um, that seems to me not a particularly difficult thing to do, is to write about our own mind. It's difficult to do well without it being kind of solipsistic. Um, but actually to deliver us into the mind of a particular kind of person that is not ourselves or the writer is a very great feat. Um, in a sense, it's easier to know the mind of God, I think, than the mind of another human being, um, because as as human beings, we are complex, we are flawed, we are hidden, we are disingenuous. We don't know ourselves, so that's incredibly complicated. And what Schofield does in this book is quite extraordinary. Is the essentially the central character Martin John is a uh, what used to be called a sort of flasher, someone who exposes themselves in public. Um, but actually, what it is an incredible poetic portrait, psychological portrait um, of many things, of paranoia, of compulsion, of a mother son relationship, of mental illness, of our reaction to people who have unappealing compulsions. Because there are many compulsions, people have many behaviours that are manifest that are, appealing, eccentricity, that are quite endearing. But obviously, some people are compelled to do acts, compelled to acts that are very unappealing, and clearly, public sexual exposure is right up there. And there are many studies in terms of whether that act can lead to greater acts of sexual transgression, or whether it's just it is a kind of just a straightforward singular compulsion. And that question is kind of left open in this book. Um, but the I think the kind of genius of this book is it takes the sort of notion of the unreliable narrator to its extreme, when it's never clear where the point of view is. Um, and in that sense, it is the work of a poet, because that's what I think poetry does. It is both the poet, the world, and the character of the poem, whatever. There is no judgment, and it is written in often very kind of gnomic sentences. I mean, you can see here it's very broken up. That's another thing, sort of here like that, because it seems to me once again, and I've talked about this before, it's it's trying to kind of break up how the mind works into the kind of fragments that I think is truer to the experience of the mind, and how we process the world than the kind of unbroken linearity of sentences. Um, so yeah, I mean it's fascinating. It's compulsive. It's very honest. If I have one criticism, forgive me, is I wish it would. It seems to be set about 20, 30 years ago, um, and I kind of feel that it would be more pertinent and poignant even if it was set now, because it almost kind of it almost kind of feels as though the world has kind of moved on from that kind of sexual deviancy, if you will, um, and uh, and it hasn't, because about 200 yards over there is a small wood. I live in the middle of London, but there is a small wood here, and my 12-year-old daughter was exposed to that when she was walking the dog with her friend. Um, it's the kind of classic notion of a flasher. So there is a slight, there seems to me, what's the word? There would have been another win here, I think, if it was in the technological world that we live in, rather than feeling a bit sort of 1970s. But other than that, it's written with great bravery, because it goes for subtlety through kind of repetition, which mimics the kind of compulsive nature of the mentality. It's non-judgmental, but it also doesn't in any way require us to have sort of strong, this may seem a contradiction, strong superficial feelings for the characters. We're just allowed to live kind of his life with him, through it moves back and forth in terms of its time, but that's one of it. It's just we live through what it's like to be not in control of our mind or our body, and in that way, I think it's an incredibly strong portrait of mental illness. And that's it. So do buy it from their website. It's called Martin John by Anakana, Schofield, and it's published by And Other Stories. Many thanks.